The journey has been long and the path difficult, but the final resolution is finally within your reach at the end. Stay with us as we piece together the last bit of the puzzle to reveal the truth. Hit subscribe now and witness the most important ending today. My son was gone, or so they told me. Every Sunday, I made the drive out to my daughter-in-law's place in Macon, Georgia, 2 hours each way, and left an envelope with $800 on her kitchen counter. 4 years of Sundays. Then one morning, the man at the post office slid a package across the counter, looked me in the eye, and said, "Mr. Calloway, I think you ought to know something. Your son came in here last Tuesday." That was the moment the floor disappeared beneath me, and everything I'd believed for 4 years turned to smoke. I'm glad you're here. Before this story goes any further, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment. Tell me your city or your state. I read every single one. And one thing before we begin, some details in this story have been changed to protect people still involved in legal proceedings. But the heart of what happened, every bit of it, is real. The lesson at the end of this story is the most important thing I've ever shared. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Gerald Calloway. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a tile setter in Augusta, Georgia on my knees, 6 days a week, laying floors in hospitals and hotels and houses that other people got to live in. My hands look like old leather. My right knee has a titanium rod in it from a fall off a scaffold in 2009. I never got rich. I never expected to. What I had was my family, and I thought that was everything. My son Marcus was 34 when he died. That's what they told me. A car accident on I-16, heading back from Savannah on a Tuesday night in November. His wife, Brenda, called me at 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I looked at the clock on the microwave when the phone rang, and something in me already knew the call wasn't good. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Gerald, there's been an accident. Marcus is gone." I drove to the hospital in my pajamas. I remember the parking lot lights were blurring because I couldn't stop my eyes from watering. A doctor I'd never seen before told me there was nothing they could do. Internal bleeding. He was gone before the ambulance reached the hospital. I asked to see him. Brenda grabbed my arm and said the doctors were recommending against it, that it would be better to remember him the way he was. I was in shock. I didn't argue. The funeral was small. Closed casket. Brenda said he would have wanted it that way. Marcus had always been a private person, even as a boy. He got that from his mother, my late wife Dorothy, who passed 7 years before Marcus did, or before I thought he did. Dorothy was the kind of woman who kept her pain to herself, and her joy loud and bright for everyone around her. Marcus had her eyes, and her stubbornness, and her laugh that started in his shoulders before it reached his face. After the funeral, Brenda came to me with paperwork. Medical bills from the hospital, the ambulance, the emergency surgery they'd attempted. Over $60,000. The life insurance Marcus had carried through his job at the logistics company had a clause, she said, something about the policy lapsing if premium payments were missed. And Marcus had missed too. The bulk of the debt, she said, would fall to the estate. And then she looked at me across my own kitchen table with red eyes and said, "Gerald, I don't know how I'm going to raise Lily alone and pay this off at the same time." Lily was 5 years old at the time. She had Dorothy's cheekbones and Marcus's laugh, and she called me Pop Pop, and she was the only reason I got out of bed for the first 6 months after I thought my son was dead. I told Brenda I would help. $800 a month. I could swing it if I picked up extra work, weekend jobs, patios, and backsplashes for homeowners who couldn't afford the big contractors. My knees screamed at me every morning when I stood up, but I told myself it was for Lily. For Marcus's little girl. A man does what he has to do. For 4 years, I drove to Macon every Sunday. I brought the envelope. Sometimes I brought groceries too, or school supplies for Lily, or a small toy I'd spotted at the dollar store that I thought she might like. Brenda was always polite. Grateful, she said, every single time. Lily always ran to me when I came through the door. She smelled like crayons and apple juice, and she would grab my hand and drag me to see whatever she'd built with her blocks or drawn in her sketchbook. Those 20 minutes with that little girl were the best part of my week. I noticed things The way you notice things when you're old and you've lived enough life to know when something doesn't sit right. Brenda's car changed. A used Honda Civic became a leased Hyundai SUV. The living room had a new sectional sofa where the old sagging couch used to be. The kitchen got new countertops, granite, not the laminate that had been there before. I told myself she must have gotten a promotion at the dental office where she worked. I told myself she was doing her best, raising a child alone. I told myself a lot of things because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to look at. The post office on Broad Street in Augusta is where I'd been picking up my P.O. box for 16 years. Ronnie Tidwell has worked the counter there almost as long. We're not close friends, but we know each other the way you know a man you've seen every week for a decade and a half. He knows I'm a widower. He knows I do tile work. I know he coaches Little League on weekends and takes his mother to church every Sunday. On a Thursday morning in March, I came in to pick up a package, a set of tile nippers I'd ordered online. Ronnie slid the package across the counter, and then he paused. His mouth opened and closed once, like he was making a decision. "Gerald," he said, keeping his voice low even though the post office was empty. "I don't know if this is my business, but I've known you a long time, and I'd want somebody to tell me." I looked at him. "Tell you what, your son," Ronnie said carefully, "Marcus, he came in here last Tuesday. He was picking up a package from that same P.O. box you've got. I recognized him from the photo you used to keep on your key ring, the one from his wedding. I almost said something to him, but then he was gone." Ronnie paused. "Gerald, he didn't look like a man who was dead." I stood at that counter for a long moment. I could hear the fluorescent light buzzing above me. I could feel my heart beating in my fingertips. "You're sure it was him?" I said. It wasn't a question. Not really. "I've got a good memory for faces," Ronnie said. "It was him, same build, same scar above his left eyebrow. I remember you told me once he got that from a bicycle accident when he was 8. He looked at me steadily. "I'm sorry, Gerald. I thought you should know." I drove home in a state I can only describe as somewhere between numb and falling. I sat in my truck in the driveway for 40 minutes without going inside. I stared at the photo of Marcus and Dorothy on my phone screen, taken at Thanksgiving 2017, 2 years before I thought I lost them both in the same cruel stretch of years. Marcus grinning with cranberry sauce on his chin, Dorothy pretending to be mortified. That evening I called the one person in the world I knew would tell me the truth and then help me find the rest of it. My younger sister, Carolyn. She's 61, retired from 25 years as a claims adjuster for a regional insurance company, and she is the sharpest, most patient, most methodical person I have ever known. When she was working, her colleagues called her the machine, not unkindly. She had a gift for finding the one detail in a stack of paperwork that everyone else had walked right past. I told her everything. The call from Brenda 4 years ago, the closed casket, the medical bills, the $800 a month, 48 payments, $38,400. Ronnie at the post office. All of it. Carolyn didn't say a word until I finished. Then she said, "Don't contact Brenda. Don't go to Macon. Don't do anything until I get there Friday morning." She was at my door at 7 a.m., with a laptop bag over her shoulder and a box of files that she'd apparently already started building based on our phone call. She sat up at my kitchen table and worked for 3 hours straight while I made coffee and tried to stay out of her way. The first thing she checked was the accident report. She had a contact at the Georgia Department of Transportation from her insurance years. Within 90 minutes, she had a name, a date, a case number for the accident on I-16 that supposedly killed my son. She cross-referenced it with the incident report. There had been an accident on that stretch of highway that night. One vehicle. The registered owner of the vehicle was not Marcus Calloway. The accident was real, Carolyn said. One fatality. But the driver was a 48-year-old man named Dennis Pryor. Different vehicle, different name, different everything. I stared at her. Then what happened to Marcus? Carolyn turned the laptop to face me. That's what we're going to find out. She pulled Marcus's social security number, which I had on file from helping him with taxes years ago. She ran it through every public database she knew. Credit activity, address history, property records. Marcus Calloway had opened a new credit account 14 months after his supposed death in Tallahassee, Florida, under his own name and social security number. He'd signed a lease on an apartment in Tallahassee 16 months after the accident. His name appeared on a business license filed with Leon County for a small landscaping company called Palmetto Verde, opened 2 years ago. He's been in Tallahassee for close to 3 years, Carolyn said quietly. And Gerald, she paused. The business license lists a co-owner, a woman named Brenda Calloway. The kitchen went very still. I heard Dorothy's voice in my head, the way I always did in moments when the ground shifted. She used to say that the truth doesn't hide forever. It just waits until you're ready to see it. I had not been ready for 4 years. I had not let myself be. I thought about the new SUV, the granite countertops, the way Brenda always seemed to have a reason why I shouldn't come inside on certain Sundays, why Lily was at a birthday party or a play date or spending the weekend with a cousin, how there were no cousins. Marcus was an only child. She's been sending him money, I said slowly. My money, Carolyn nodded. That would be my read. You fund their household in Macon. She routes a portion to him in Tallahassee. Meanwhile, they both keep you paying because, as long as you believe he's dead, you keep the envelope coming. $38,400. Not counting the groceries and the school supplies and the birthday presents. Not counting the extra $200 I'd left one December when Brenda said the furnace had gone out. Not counting the Sunday afternoons I'd spent on my aching knee on Lily's bedroom floor, assembling bookshelves and fixing a leaky faucet under the bathroom sink because Brenda said she didn't know who else to call. And through all of it, my son had been alive, breathing, running a landscaping company in Florida with his wife, who was also alive, also breathing, also cashing my checks. I closed my eyes and thought about Dorothy. Dorothy had loved Marcus with the specific, fierce tenderness of a woman who'd lost 2 pregnancies before she carried him to term. She used to say he was the child God kept sending back until she was ready to receive him right. When he was small, she drove him 40 minutes each way to a better school district because she said her boy deserved the best foundation she could give him. When he was in high school and struggling with math, she sat with him at this same kitchen table every night for a semester until his grade came up. She worked 30 years as a school cafeteria cook, and every dollar she didn't spend on the house went into a savings account she called Marcus's Start. She died of a stroke at 63. I found her in the garden. She was still holding her trowel. The tomatoes she'd planted that spring came in beautifully that August. I couldn't bring myself to pick them. Marcus had stood at her grave and wept without any embarrassment, the way men only cry for their mothers. He had held my hand. 2 years later, he was supposedly dead too. I had been back to that cemetery more times than I could count, standing between their 2 headstones, talking to both of them. Except one of those headstones was a lie. Carolyn gave me a moment. She was good at that. Then she said, "Gerald, we need to decide how we want to do this." I said, "I want to know everything first. All of it. Before anyone knows we know." She nodded. "That's the smart move." Over the next week, Carolyn built a case. She was methodical and thorough, and she said very little unless she had something certain to say. She contacted a former colleague at a fraud investigation firm in Atlanta, a woman named Patricia Oakes, who agreed to help as a personal favor. Together they pulled financial records, address verifications, business filings, and phone records using every legal avenue available to them. The picture that emerged was precise and ugly. Marcus and Brenda had been planning this for at least a year before the staged death. They'd found the real accident on I-16 after the fact, not before. The accident had been reported in a brief news item, and Brenda had used it as the scaffolding for a story that didn't exist. The death certificate she'd shown me had been forged, a convincing document built on a real template with fabricated physician signatures and a false certificate number from the Georgia Office of Vital Records system, the same way a person might build a convincing fake ID if they knew enough about how the real ones looked. The life insurance policy she'd told me had lapsed? Marcus actually had a separate policy through a credit union that had paid out $42,000 to Brenda as the named beneficiary 3 months after the staged death. She had deposited it in a joint account shared with Marcus, now operating out of a credit union branch in Tallahassee. Patricia found something else. 6 months ago, Marcus and Brenda had filed for a small business loan through a Florida community bank. The loan application listed their combined assets and income. It made no mention of a deceased father-in-law in Augusta, Georgia, sending $800 a month. But the most devastating thing Carolyn found came on a Wednesday afternoon when she called me into the kitchen and turned her laptop toward me without saying a word. It was a Facebook profile, private but a mutual connection. Someone who'd known Dorothy from church had shared a photo from a birthday party 2 months ago. In the background, barely visible, standing next to a folding table with a sheet cake on it, was a man in a blue polo shirt with his arm around a woman's shoulder. It was Marcus. He looked healthy. He looked relaxed. He was smiling. I stared at that image for a long time. "He's been at birthday parties," I said. My voice came out flat and strange, like someone else was speaking through me. "Looks that way," Carolyn said. I thought about every Sunday I had driven to Macon, every envelope, every time I'd gotten back into my truck with my knee aching and told myself it was worth it for Lily, for Marcus's daughter, for the piece of my son I still had in the world. And the whole time, Marcus had been at someone's birthday party in Tallahassee, eating sheet cake and smiling in photographs. I thought about something I hadn't let myself think about until that moment. Marcus knew about my knee. He'd been there when the surgeon explained the limitations. He knew every extra job I took, every weekend I spent on a floor I shouldn't have been on, was costing me in ways that couldn't be undone. He knew I was 63 years old when he died, and that I was paying for it out of Social Security and whatever I could earn with my hands. He knew all of that, and he let me send the money anyway. Carolyn was watching me. "Gerald." "I'm all right," I said, which was not true. "Do you want to stop for today?" "No." I looked at her. "I want to finish." She reached across the table and gripped my hand the same way she had when we were children, and she was the younger one and I was supposed to be the strong one. Then she said, "We're going to finish." Patricia Oakes connected us with an attorney in Augusta named James Whitfield, who had handled fraud and elder financial abuse cases for 15 years. We met with him on a Thursday afternoon. He reviewed everything Carolyn had compiled. He was a quiet man, 50-something, with a methodical voice that reminded me of a carpenter who doesn't rush any cut. He said, "Mr. Calloway, what your daughter-in-law and son have done constitutes criminal fraud, wire fraud, if any of these transactions cross state lines, which they did, elder financial abuse under Georgia statute, and conspiracy. The forged death certificate is a felony on its own. The insurance payout may constitute a separate federal offense." He asked how I wanted to proceed. I told him I wanted to make sure Lily was protected before anything else happened. Whatever Marcus and Brenda had done, Lily was 9 years old, and she was innocent, and I would not let her be collateral damage in the consequences of her parents' choices. Whitfield said he could work with family services to ensure Lily's placement and well-being were addressed as part of any law enforcement action. He said, "Before we go to the authorities, I want to be certain about one more thing." He looked at me steadily. "Are you prepared for the possibility that your son cooperated fully and knowingly in all of this from the beginning?" I looked back at him. "I've been preparing for that since Wednesday," I said. He nodded slowly. "All right, then let's do this right. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If you're still with me, just comment below and say I'm still here. That's it. 3 words. I want to know you're listening, because what comes next is the part of this story I've had to tell myself every day since it happened, just to believe it's real. On a Friday morning in early April, Carolyn and I sat in the parking lot of a Waffle House off I-75 south of Macon, while 2 Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents drove past us toward Brenda's house. James Whitfield had coordinated with the GBI and the Tallahassee Police Department, who moved simultaneously on the address in Florida. My phone was on the center console between us. Carolyn had her hands folded on the table. Neither of us spoke. The call came 40 minutes later. It was Agent Dana Rowell, who had been our contact through the whole process. A woman with a direct manner and careful eyes. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "we have them both in custody. Your son is with TPD in Tallahassee. Brenda Calloway is here in Macon." A pause. "Lily is safe. She's with a neighbor. We have a family services worker with her now." I said thank you and set the phone down. Carolyn put her arm around me, and we sat there in that parking lot for a while without saying anything. Agent Rowell called again an hour later and asked if I wanted to come to the Macon field office. She said Marcus was being transported from Tallahassee and would be there by early afternoon. She said it was my choice whether I wanted to see him. I said yes. The GBI field office was a plain building on a plain street. I sat in a conference room with beige walls and a metal table and waited. Carolyn was beside me. James Whitfield was beside her. They brought Marcus in at 2:14 inches the afternoon. He looked older than the photograph. His hair had more gray in it than I remembered. He'd lost some weight. He walked in with his hands in front of him, not in cuffs for this meeting, and when he saw me sitting at that table, he stopped moving entirely. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I looked at my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders at the county fair, the teenager I'd taught to drive in an empty church parking lot on Saturday mornings, the man I had stood beside at his mother's grave and held on to in the dark. I looked at him, and I looked for something in his face that would make sense of 4 years. "Dad," he said. His voice was low and rough. "Sit down, Marcus," I said. He sat. "I'm not going to ask you why," I said. "I've had a month to think about the why, and I've come to understand that there probably isn't a why that I'm going to find acceptable. So I'm not going to ask." I paused. "What I am going to tell you is what happened while you were gone." He looked at me. "I worked every weekend for 4 years," I said. "My knee has been telling me to stop for 2 of them. I have 3 jobs lined up right now that I probably shouldn't be taking, but I'm taking them because I have not allowed myself to stop." I leaned forward. "You knew that. You knew exactly what it costs me to earn $800 a month on top of what I already do, and you let me do it for 4 years. Marcus's jaw was tight. His eyes were wet, but I didn't let that move me. "Your mother's grave has your name on the headstone next to it," I said. "Not because she's buried there yet, God willing, but because I put it there 2 years ago when I thought I was going to follow you both too soon. I used to sit there and talk to you. I told you about the jobs I was working. I told you about Lily growing up. I told you about the Braves season. My voice held but barely. You were 40 minutes from that cemetery, Marcus. For 3 of those 4 years, you were 40 minutes away." He looked down at the table. "Your daughter is 9 years old," I said. "And she has been living in a house built on a lie that you and her mother constructed together. Whatever she understood about that, whatever she didn't understand, she is going to carry some version of it for the rest of her life. That is what you chose for her." The room was very quiet. Marcus lifted his eyes. "Dad, I know that nothing I say." "Then don't say anything yet," I said. "Just listen." He nodded once. "I'm going to tell you what happens now," I said. "You and Brenda are going to face what you did. Whitfield here is going to make sure the state of Georgia and the federal government both know exactly what you did and how long you did it and how much it cost. You are going to answer for the forged death certificate. You are going to answer for the insurance fraud. You are going to answer for $38,400 and every dollar that came with it." I kept my voice level. "And Lily is coming home with me." Something moved across his face. "Dad, I'm not asking," I said. "I already have an emergency custody order. Whitfield filed it yesterday morning. Lily is going to finish out the school year in the same school she's been in, and then she is going to come live with me in Augusta while you and Brenda figure out what comes next. She will be loved. She will be safe. She will know the truth when she's old enough to understand it, and I will tell it to her in a way that doesn't destroy her." Marcus was crying now, quietly, without making much sound, the way he had always cried since he was small. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I waited. "Do you hate me?" I thought about that for a long moment. I thought about Dorothy's garden. I thought about the tile work I should have stopped doing 2 years ago. I thought about Ronnie Tidwell at the post office counter, making the choice to tell me something he could have kept to himself. "No," I said, But that's not something you get to use right now. What I feel about you is something I'm going to have to work through on my own time, and it has nothing to do with what happens in that courtroom." He nodded. He was still looking at the table. "One more thing," I said. "Your mother would have been devastated. Not because you got caught, because you were capable of this. That would have broken her heart in a way nothing else could. I want you to sit with that. Not as a punishment, just as the truth." I stood up. Carolyn stood with me. I looked at my son one more time, and then I walked out of that conference room into a hallway that smelled like copy paper and industrial carpet cleaner. And I stood there with my back against the wall and breathed. Carolyn didn't say anything. She just stood next to me and waited. After a while, I said, "Let's go get Lily." We drove to the neighbor's house, where a family services worker named Donna had been sitting with her for 3 hours. Lily was on the couch with a coloring book, a small girl with Dorothy's cheekbones and Marcus's eyes and a red crayon in her hand. When I came through the door, she looked up and went still for a second, and then she climbed off that couch and ran to me, and I caught her and held her the way I had wanted to hold her every Sunday for 4 years, when 20 minutes was never enough. She smelled like crayons and something citrusy, and I stood in that stranger's living room in Macon, Georgia, holding my granddaughter with both arms, and I did not let go for a long time. "Pop, Pop," she said into my shoulder. "Where are we going?" "We're going home, sweetheart," I said. "You're coming to stay with me for a while." She leaned back to look at me. "Is Mom in trouble?" I looked at her face. This 9-year-old girl, who had never done one single thing to deserve any of this. "Your mom made some choices that had consequences," I said. "That's something we're going to talk about slowly, over time, when you're ready. Right now, the only thing you need to know is that you are safe, and I am here, and that is not going to change." She looked at me for a moment the way children look at you when they're deciding whether to believe you. Then she put her head back on my shoulder. "Okay," she said. The courtroom proceedings stretched over several months. Whitfield prepared everything with the same unhurried precision I'd noticed the first time we met. I appreciated that. I had spent my life working with my hands, and I understood what it meant to do a job without shortcuts. Marcus pled guilty to wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing a false official document. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison with 3 years of supervised release and ordered to pay full restitution of $38,400 plus interest. His attorney argued for leniency on the basis of a first offense and a lack of violent conduct. Judge Patricia Harmon acknowledged the arguments and said the sentence reflected both the extended nature of the crime and the specific vulnerability of the victim. Brenda received 5 years for her role, which the prosecution demonstrated had been more active than Marcus's in the daily management of the fraud, the forged documents, the financial routing, and the decisions about how much I should continue to receive and when. She sobbed when the sentence was read. I watched her and felt nothing particular, which surprised me. I had expected to feel something more. The insurance fraud conviction resulted in a federal sentence of 2 additional years for Brenda, to be served concurrently. The $42,000 from the insurance payout was fully clawed back. The total restitution order came to a number that included the original $38,400, plus compounded interest, plus additional damages the judge assessed under Georgia's Elder Financial Abuse statute. When it was finally settled and the seized assets from the Tallahassee accounts were applied, I received a check for an amount I had not expected to see. I sat at my kitchen table with that check and a notepad and wrote down a list the same way I'd made every practical decision in my life, carefully and without rush. The first item on the list was a contribution to Lily's college fund, locked and secure with her name on it, because Dorothy had believed in education funds the way some people believe in prayer, which is to say absolutely and without conditions. The second was a proper medical consultation for my knee, not the walking it off approach I'd been using for 2 years. A real consultation with a real doctor about what I could and couldn't do going forward without making things worse. The third was a set of quality tools for a woodworking project I'd been putting off for 3 years, a workbench I'd been planning to build in the garage for Lily, A place where we could work together on weekends, the way I'd once worked with Marcus in Dorothy's backyard on small repairs and projects that probably didn't need doing, but were an excuse to spend time together. The fourth was a visit to the cemetery. Not to bring anything, just to go. I stood at Dorothy's grave on a Tuesday afternoon when the Georgia spring was just beginning to warm up. The azaleas behind the cemetery fence were starting to open. Dorothy had loved azaleas. She said they were dependable, which was the highest compliment she gave anything. "It's over," I told her. "Marcus is alive. He's facing what he did. Lily is with me. She's safe." I put my hand on the stone. "I kept her safe, Dorothy. I want you to know that." The wind moved through the trees above me. I stood there for a while and let it. 2 weeks later, I had the second headstone removed. The blank one, with Marcus's name beside hers. I had it replaced with a simple garden marker, a flat stone with no words, just a space for the azalea bush I planted beside it, the same variety Dorothy used to grow along the back fence. Lily came with me when I planted it. She dug the hole with a small trowel. Very serious about getting it right, her tongue at the corner of her mouth in concentration. "Is this for Grandma?" she asked. "It's for both of them," I said. "For your grandmother, who loved azaleas, and for the part of your dad that I want to believe is still worth something." Lily looked at the bush for a moment. Then she said, "Do you think he'll be different when he gets out?" "I hope so," I said. "That's all I can honestly tell you. I hope so." She nodded slowly, the way children do when they're putting something in a place they'll come back to later. And then she patted the dirt around the base of the plant with both hands and said, "Okay, I think it needs water." We watered it together. That evening we sat on the porch and watched the sun go down over the magnolia tree in the front yard. Lily had her sketchbook and was drawing something with intense concentration, pausing every few minutes to study whatever she was working on. I had a glass of sweet tea and my knee elevated on the railing, which my doctor had finally and firmly instructed me to do. "Pop, pop," Lily said without looking up from her drawing. "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think everything's going to be okay?" I looked at this girl, 9 years old, drawing in her sketchbook on my porch with the magnolia tree casting a long shadow across the yard. And I thought about Dorothy, about Marcus at the county fair on my shoulders reaching for a balloon, about Ronnie Tidwell leaning across the post office counter because he thought I should know. "I think we're going to build something good," I said. "You and me. It might not look the way I thought things were going to look when you were born, but I've lived long enough to know that some of the best things in a life don't look the way you planned." Lily turned her sketchbook around. She'd drawn 2 figures, a tall one and a small one, standing in front of a house with a tree. Stick figures, the way 9-year-olds draw them. But she'd given the tall one gray hair and the small one a sketchbook. "That's us," she said. "I can see that," I said. She went back to drawing. The magnolia rustled. A pair of cardinals crossed the yard, which Dorothy had always said was a sign of something good coming. I held my sweet tea and watched the light change, and felt the weight I had been carrying for 4 years settle somewhere different, not gone, not forgotten, just shifted to a place where I could carry it without it bending me. There are things I want you to take from this story, not because I have all the answers. I am 67 years old with a bad knee and a granddaughter who keeps leaving her crayons on my kitchen table, and I don't have many answers at all. But I have what I learned. I trusted without asking questions, because asking questions felt like a betrayal of grief. I let love make me passive, when love should have made me careful. I told myself that the discomfort I felt on those Sunday drives was tiredness, was age, was anything other than what it was, which was my own instincts trying to get my attention. If something doesn't sit right, let it sit with you until you understand why. That discomfort is not weakness. It is information. Forgiveness is something I'm still working on. I don't think it happens in a courtroom or even in a conference room across a metal table. I think it happens slowly, in small moments, over years. I forgive Marcus the way I tend Dorothy's garden, a little at a time, without expecting it to happen all at once. When he gets out, there is a conversation ahead of us that I am not ready for yet, and that is all right. Lily will decide what she wants from her relationship with her father in her own time and in her own way, and I will not make that choice for her. But right now, today, she is safe. She is growing. She left her red crayon on my kitchen table again this morning, and I put it back in the box, and I was glad it was there. And to you listening to this, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying tonight, I want you to know this. The people who love you most are sometimes not the ones you were born with. Sometimes they are the woman at the post office counter who decides it's worth saying something. Sometimes they are the sister who shows up at 7 in the morning with a laptop and a box of files and doesn't need to be asked twice. Sometimes they are a 9-year-old girl who draws a picture of the two of you and shows it to you like it's the most natural thing in the world. Hold on to those people. Ask the hard questions, even when you're afraid of the answers. And never stop being the kind of person who keeps their word, because the world has enough people who don't. If this story stayed with you, please leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're here for more stories about truth, family, and what it means to keep going, subscribe to this channel. I'm grateful for your time, every single minute of it.